In the New York Times best-selling book Bad Therapy, investigative journalist Abigail Shrier explores how the mental health industry has transformed the way we teach, treat, discipline, and even talk to our kids. She reveals in Bad Therapy that for most kids, mental health interventions have serious side effects and few proven benefits. Bad Therapy is a must-read for anyone questioning why our efforts to bolster America's kids, from therapy to social emotional learning to gentle parenting, have backfired, and what it will take for parents to lead a turnaround. On sale now wherever books are sold.
Hello and welcome to The Bookmonger. I'm John J. Miller of National Review. Thanks for listening. This show is a production of National Review, and we're recording from the studio of WRFH, the campus radio station of Hillsdale College. Our guest is Tim Murtaugh, author of Swing Hard in Case You Hit It, My Escape from Addiction and Shot at Redemption on the Trump Campaign. Tim, welcome to The Bookmonger.
John, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's start with the bad part. Before you were communications director for President Trump's reelection campaign in 2020, how did you fall into addiction? What happened?
Well, it was a long story, but the way that I got into addiction happened. I started drinking when I was in high school, and it gradually got worse and worse. And I used to like to tell myself that I wasn't drinking any more frequently than some of my friends were, but that was never true. I used to tell myself that, but it was never true. And it progressed to a point where I would drink all day. And I used to joke about it, and people have probably heard the old joke that you can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning. And that, for me, that was true. And I used to, when I was working on Capitol Hill, for example, or on various political campaigns, there were periods of weeks or months that would go by that I bet you I was never sober for even 30 seconds during the course of a 24-hour day, over the course of weeks or months. And so it took years. It took decades to really dig myself into that hole. I lost jobs along the way. I went to rehab 5 times. And so it really nothing was helping me until I got to a point where the law was really catching up to me, and I was going to be in really serious trouble. I'd already had 2 DUIs. And it got to the point where if I didn't do something very serious about stopping that, I was going to lose everything personally and professionally. And that's when I turned a corner. That was in the year 2015. And things got an awful lot better after I quit drinking. The promises that they tell you about in Alcoholics Anonymous are actually true. My life improved dramatically. And over time, my wife had talked to me about it before, and she had encouraged me to write a book about my experiences as an alcoholic, but also in politics. And so I thought about it, and I decided to write this book really for 2 primary reasons. The first one being that the times that I was in rehab, I spent a lot of time in the bookstore at the inpatient rehab places, and I bought a lot of books to read while I was in there. And the clinical ones were good, which has a lot of biology and different things about how alcohol and drugs affect your brain and all of your organs and all that, and those are fine. But I felt myself gravitating towards the stories that were written by people who told their own experiences and all the problems that they encountered and some of the horror stories, and then how they made it through. And those books really helped me a lot. And I just devoured them when I was in rehab and after, when I was home. And I thought it would be nice if I could write a book like that, because if someone picks it up and is having trouble with addiction of some kind, and it helps them not pick up a drink for even 10 minutes, then I feel like it was worth writing the book. The second reason I wrote it is because early on in the Trump campaign, when I got hired on in February of 2019, and I have a police record from my drinking years. As I said, I have 2 DUIs and a number of different arrests for drunk in public or disorderly conduct and things like that, more minor offenses as compared to a DUI, but a bunch of those. And, anybody who takes 10 minutes to look into a background, you can find that kind of criminal record. And so it didn't take long, just a couple of weeks after I had started on the Trump campaign in early 2019, that I started getting calls from reporters who had been approached by opposition researchers from the Democratic Party on the other side of the aisle, who had compiled a dossier on me, and they were shopping it around because I was the new communications director for Trump, and they were trying to get people to write a story about the fact that I had a criminal record in my past for related to alcohol. And luckily, thankfully, we were able to convince all those reporters that things that had happened to me years in the past were in no way related to the president's campaign. They were trying to hurt him by attacking me, and we succeeded in killing those stories. But I thought that, in addition to helping other addicts, if I write a story about my own problems, then no one could ever use it against me again. And it takes the power away from those people and restores it to me. So that's what I did.
So, Tim, I want to get into the politics of all this in just a moment, but what finally worked for you? What allowed you to go into recovery?
Well, it was really a very serious threat that I was going to lose everything. I was still on probation for my second of 2 DUIs, and I had served 10 days in jail for that second DUI, but I had 80 days of jail time suspended for 3 years. And if I got in trouble over the course of those 3 years for anything alcohol related or anything that the court decided was relevant, then I was going to go and serve those 80 days. And wouldn't you know it, that while I was still on probation, I went out and got drunk one day and got arrested for a drunk in public. And I woke up in the drunk tank at the Adult Correctional Center in Fairfax County. And I realized, oh man, I have really done it now, because if I get convicted of this, I'm going away for 80 days. That's almost 3 months. I was going to lose my job for sure, and forget about just a job. I was going to lose my career. I had a new wife, and she was about fed up with my antics. My parents and my family were about sick of me, and so if I didn't get it together right then, I was going to be in deep trouble. So I went to rehab again. I went and had the ignition interlock thing put on my car voluntarily again. I went to a ton of AA meetings, and I went and did hours and hours and hours of volunteer service. And by the time I went to court, I had a good lawyer who suggested all those things. By the time I went to court, they said, you keep your nose clean and we'll be okay. And they didn't prosecute me on the drunken public charge. And I did not end up having to go to jail for those 80 days and lose everything. And I'm very grateful for that. I did serve 10 days on my second DUI, 5 days on the first one, but did not go away for those 80 remaining days. And that saved me. And I haven't had a drink since that day that I got arrested for drunken public, May 16th, 2015. This was my last drink, and I haven't had one since.
And none of this came out in public during the Trump campaign. You mentioned you got some media inquiries, but you're able to convince them not to publish on it. I find that remarkable.
Well, the deal, the way I argued it to them was that, look, this was at the time back in 2019 when the reporters were approaching me. All of this had been 4 years in the past, and so I talked to the reporters and said, "Listen, I understand why you're asking me this. It sounds kind of juicy, but it's not related to my job here. If I got arrested while I was working on the president's campaign, that'd be one thing. But if the threshold is, has anybody had a problem with alcohol and brushes with the law in the past as a result? You're talking about Washington, D.C. There's a ton of people in this town. And I dare say on any other campaign, there's a bunch of people who probably have a similar story that I have. And if you're going to write a story about me, then you better be prepared to write a lot of stories of this nature."
It sounds like the press behaved, dare I say, responsibly.
They did, I think. I mean, there was one time Brad Parscale at the very beginning. He was the campaign manager, and I had told him and the president, and when I worked in the administration, Secretary Sonny Perdue, I told them all about my background, so it was not a surprise to them. They hired me despite that, and so when the reporters came around, they knew that it was possible. And Brad, and I'm not going to mention all of the players here, but Brad picked up the phone and called the publication and said, "Listen, if you're going to write a story about my brand new comms director right out of the box like this, we've got almost 2 years to go in this campaign. You can forget about accessing anybody in this campaign if this is how you're going to kick it off." So he made a pretty good threat to one particular news outlet, and I don't know if that's what did it or not, but they're among the groups that did not write stories. Yeah.
The title of your memoir is "Swing Hard in Case You Hit It." What does that mean?
Well, it's something that my dad used to say to me when I would leave the house to go to baseball practice. We were a baseball family. I come from a baseball family. My grandfather, named Danny Murtaugh, played Major League Baseball and was better known as the manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates for many years, won the World Series twice. And my dad played minor league ball as well, up to AAA. So when I would leave the house to go to baseball practice, my dad would shout at me, just joking, "Hey, swing hard in case you hit it," which I thought was a funny thing to say. But then if you think about it, it's actually a pretty good philosophy to approach life with, because if there's anything that you are doing in life, you might as well put some effort into it, because if you connect, if you actually succeed, your success will be greater if you put some effort into it in the first place. So swing hard in case you hit it. I think it makes sense. And it's a little bit of a tribute to my father there, who is also an alcoholic in recovery. He hasn't had a drink since 1987.
What did you learn about politics in 2020 during that reelection campaign that you didn't know beforehand?
I guess I learned how truly angry and vicious a lot of the mainstream media can be. And it is, I sometimes I say to my friends, I've been a Republican campaign communicator for a long time, for about 25 years. And we used to joke to each other, like, gosh, it would be so easy to be a Democrat press flack because the media is largely on your side if you're a Democrat. But having worked as the communications director for the Trump campaign in 2020, which I would say, until this one happens, the 2020 campaign was the most watched political campaign in world history. And I would say over 90% of the media inquiries that we got and 90% of the media coverage that we got was openly hostile and negative. And I just was not prepared for how willing certain members of the press are to be openly hostile to one viewpoint or another. I thought that most of the time they would try to pretend that there was some sort of impartiality, but I was shocked at the number of members of the mainstream press corps who were willing to be perceived as having taken sides. They were willing to do that, and I was actually surprised by that.
One more question. Tim, you worked for the president. You got to know him a little bit. What should Americans know about him that they may not already know?
I think not a lot of the times that it comes through. He's a really nice guy. And I think when his public persona, and of course he does this, he does it, he feeds into it, of course, and he's a brash guy and he says what's on his mind and he offends a lot of people by doing that. But he actually, when the lights are off and the cameras are off, he's a really nice guy. He's very easygoing. And here's the other thing that's part of that. He is really, really wickedly funny. He is among the funniest people that I've ever been around. And I think a lot of his sense of humor does show through when he's at a rally or giving an interview or something like that. But he's a really funny guy, a really funny guy.
The author is Tim Murtaugh. The book is Swing Hard in Case You Hit It, My Escape from Addiction and Shot at Redemption on the Trump Campaign. Tim, thanks for joining us on The Bookmonger.
John, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please take a minute to leave a review. Your reviews help new listeners discover us, and that helps us keep this show going. We'll be back next week with a new episode of The Bookmonger.